2020 without me complicating this thing with all this technology stuff. So I wanted to bring this up. This is from Poll Everywhere. So here you go. If you go to this website, you can pull up a second screen or from your cell phone. If you're not sure how to do it and you've got a teenager nearby, you can ask them for some help. But if you go to that website right there, pollev.com/DavidShar983, and I believe Khani's going to put that into the chat as well, so that you can hopefully just copy and paste it right from there. If you cannot figure this out or just you're technologied out, that is totally okay as well. You can use the chat feature. So you can answer in the chat box as well. But if you're inclined, Poll Everywhere is great because we get to crowdsource and you get to see everyone's ideas together. So my first question to you, before I taint this with any more speaking, is what do you hope to gain from this webinar today? So if you go to polleverywhere.com, it's going to ask you for /DavidShar983. It's going to ask you for it's going to ask you for a username maybe, or like a nickname. You put in your name there, and then go ahead and answer that question. You can just type it right into the box. And I understand that sometimes people are required to be at my things, and that's okay. You can definitely admit that. I won't be offended, but I want to know why you're here today and what you hope to gain from it. So we have a sense of control. That's yeah, that's a really good one, and has a ton to do with burnout, which is something we're going to be talking about today. It's gonna, you know, a sense of control is something that we're missing right now. We're going to talk about that. Anybody else? Come on, put it in the chat box, put it in Poll Everywhere. As you're thinking about that, I want to, and you can keep typing it in, but I want to start by thanking you guys so much for being here today. And not just for being here today, but for everything that you do. I have 5 children, and 4 of them are in Jewish day school right now at OCA. And so I know, and I was a student once too, I know that your jobs, you are literally heroes. And I know that your jobs often can feel extremely thankless. And so I wanted to start off by thanking you, not just for everything you do on a normal basis, but last year when Corona hit and we got news that we had to slow the curve and we all had to go home, I was selfish. I was thinking, oh no, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna handle this? And running around like a chicken with its head cut off, while I know for a fact that you put your kids first. You started thinking about the social and emotional needs of your children, of your students. How are they going to be affected by this, by the uncertainty, the lack of control? Whether you teach preschoolers, kindergartners, or seniors in high school, how is this going to affect them? And so I need to thank you for that. And for then jumping to Zoom and all this technology that maybe you never wanted to get familiar with, you had no interest in. Maybe you were a tenured teacher, top of your game, and suddenly you've got to do the same thing over Zoom, and it is not the same. And so suddenly you're struggling. And now, after doing all of that and truly being heroes, I had teachers showing up on the front lawn, on my front lawn, with little gifts for my kids or just to check in. It was truly touching. And now you're doing it all again. Now you finally started figuring out this technology, but you're doing it all again. Now that you figured out, you're jumping into the classrooms and trying to figure out how to teach with face masks and social distancing and all of these other precautions. You guys are amazing. And you're not thanked enough, because it would be impossible to thank you enough. So let me, as a father, thank you on behalf of all of the fathers and mothers in our community and all of the people in our community, as you are the core to Jewish survival. So we got a couple more answers in. New strategies calm. I know there's a ton of anxiety right now. I hope to gain an understanding of how to improve school culture. Well, you're in the right place. Respectful communication with those with differing point of views. And that's something we're going to talk a lot about. And let's actually talk about that now for a second. So right back in your poll everywhere. If you switch back to Zoom, you want to switch back to poll everywhere. This is a scale and it's clickable technology. Go ahead and click anywhere on that continuum to show how you are feeling right now. So a green smiley face means you are feeling energized, you are feeling great, you're hitting flow, you can't wait to get back into the classroom. The red frown, that's more like the past couple weeks, maybe you spent a couple days in the fetal position on your bed in an oversized bathrobe. And we are not judging. That's a totally normal reaction as well. But it's something that I think it's important for us to know. And it looks like we're getting a couple responses. If you are not in Zoom anywhere, then right on the screen, on the Zoom screen, if you could give me what my wife does with her first graders, if you could give me a fist to 5. So fist is that totally burned out. 5 is totally engaged. And let's see it that way. So it looks like we've got people everywhere. We've got some 3s, we've got some fists. I see you guys and feel for you. And not a whole lot of greens. In the last webinar that we did, we had some more greens. But I understand wherever you are on this continuum, wherever you are on this spectrum, it makes a total sense. And let me explain why, and let me explain what it is that we're feeling. Burnout has 3 parts to it. And it's important to understand it because we have never seen higher levels. And many of you, this is exactly what you are suffering from. And that's not a great way to start the school year. And so by understanding it, we can combat it. And by the way, if you are agreeing, if you feel like, this is all silly, we can be back at school, why do we need any, of these precautions, like these kids aren't at risk? Okay, great. Pay attention too, because your coworkers might be on the other side of the scale. Your students might be on the other side of the scale. Their parents might be on the other side of the scale. Your administrators might be on the other side of the scale and feel unsafe to talk about it with you or to express that. So sensitivity, understanding our own emotions and the emotions of others is the bedrock of emotional intelligence. And if there was ever a time when emotional intelligence was a critical piece of your job, it's now. So when we look at burnout, burnout traditionally has 3 parts to it. The first piece is emotional exhaustion. And we like to think of burnout as I'm exhausted, I can't get out of bed, etc. But it's not physical exhaustion. It's not from being super busy. You guys are physically exhausted all the time. Teaching students, I don't care what grade, but especially if it's middle school, you're exhausted all the time. But the emotional exhaustion is what starts to set in when you burn out. The emotional exhaustion is that piece where you are just overwhelmed by life. The next piece of burnout, which comes directly through emotional exhaustion, is cynicism, and often termed as depersonalization, which is an extremely long word. Why can't we just stick with cynicism? But what depersonalization means in this context is that as a self-preservational move, we're feeling so overwhelmed, so we pull ourselves back from our students. We feel overwhelmed and I can't help them. And so we start feeling cynical about our job. We start feeling cynical about our mission. We start feeling cynical about our students. And so we pull ourselves away. We put up boundaries. And it's normal. It's literally preserving yourself. That's why you're doing it. And so we see cynicism start to rise up. And finally, there's a decrease in personal accomplishment. What's personal accomplishment? It means that we churn our wheels and feel like we're not getting stuff done. We've churned our wheels and we're putting in more effort than ever and feel like we're getting less out of it. I want to ask you a question in terms of when you guys went to Zoom and other platforms and had to suddenly teach your children from virtually and try to figure that all out. How many of you felt like you were on fire? Show of hands, who felt a drop in personal accomplishment? They felt like suddenly they were putting so much in and it was so hard to get anything out. It's normal, very normal. And it's important to understand that these are things that many of you are feeling today, and it's got a name, it's burnout. And there's many people in here that might be feeling a different way, but need to know that those around you may be feeling this way. And it's never been more important for people to understand that whatever side of the scale you're on, there are going to be other people everywhere on that scale. And so if you are feeling great, understand that some people aren't. If you are feeling tons of anxiety and fear and resentment and burnout, understand that there are some people who are engaged and are out there and ready to do something with it. We should rely on each other without judging each other. We should understand that wherever you are on that scale, however you are feeling, it is normal. It is normal and it is okay. But what can we do about it? So when we look at burnout, we've got these three pieces, but there's also three ingredients that cause burnout. Those three ingredients are demand, control, and support. So we look at demand. What is demand? How many of you have been in a classroom where one kid needs like help with the homework and another kid is asking to go to the bathroom, and then there's two kids that are arguing over here, and you float between those desks and just start helping everybody, right? In that moment, you oftentimes feel like a teacher. You feel like this is what you signed up for. You feel energized. We look at doctors who are running from room to room, and nurses, and they describe those feelings. When they get to do what they do, they feel energized. So when we say that demand causes burnout, it's a little unclear why it would cause burnout, but could also cause total engagement and flow. That's the other side of this scale. There's support. And support is crucial. Without support, you don't have anybody to turn to. You bottle it up. You don't know what to do, and you don't feel like you have the support from your administrators and from your coworkers. And so it very quickly makes you start feeling alone, whether that's real or imagined. And control. When you start to feel a lack of control, that's the third ingredient of burnout. So demand, control, support. If demand goes up and your sense of control goes down and your sense of having support goes down, you are on the fast track to burnout. What's happened in the world these past 6 months? How many of you feel like the demands on you have gone up? Raise your hand. How many of you feel like you have less control than ever before? Turn on the news. Why do you think we get so addicted to the news? And whether you're watching Fox or CNN, it doesn't matter. We're addicted and we're tuned in. And whether it's the New York Times or the Washington Post, we are tuned in and just voraciously taking in as much news as we want. That's us grasping for a sense of control. We just want answers, and there are none. The answers that we have change every day. The answers that we want don't exist, like when is this going to be over? And so we feel a total lack of control. We have, I don't care what politician or what doctor you are tuning into, but watch one talk by them, and I guarantee you they're going to say two statements that contradict each other completely. They're going to cite two studies that say two totally different things because nobody knows. And so we have this total lack of control. And then you've been home, and if you have kids, you've been dealing with them while trying to teach your classes online, and now you're going back and you've got massive social distancing. There's a total lack of a sense of control. And just as all of this is hitting together with Corona, we're told, stay in your homes. Stay away from your loved ones, especially if you have living parents or grandparents. Stay away from them. I don't know about you. My mom is like 70. She'd kill me if she knew I told you that, but she's around 70. And all I want when I get stressed, and I don't know, maybe this is weird from a 40-year-old, but I want to hug my mom. I want to talk. And I can't do that now. So this has been the perfect storm to cause burnout. That's the bad news. But this is not a demotivational talk. We're going to get to the good news. And the good news is you can control, there's that control word, every piece of this model. We're going back to school. We have all of our old policies, all of the old ways we used to do things. And now we have all of these new ways to do things. And often they contradict. We've been taught desks in a row don't work. Now you're walking into your classrooms and desks are in a row and they've got shields around them and whatever, right? And so we're like, what about, no, we're supposed to not do desks in a row. So there's this idea that we get hooked on to things from the past, and we're naturally not super good at adjusting on the fly. One of my favorite stories, this man is in from out of town. He goes to this wedding, Jewish wedding, in the back of a shul in the social hall, and they're dancing, and they dance like we dance. They're going in a circle, nothing too fancy, except every time they get to one spot on the dance floor, the people like dip, just like that. It's like they're dancing and then they got this move that they pull out and he's confused. So he says to the guy next to him, he said, hey, what's going on? Like, why do you guys just dip every once in a while? Like right there, everybody dips. And the guy said, I don't know. It's just the way it's always been done. You're going to have to ask the rabbi. So the guy goes and seeks out the rabbi and says, hey, rabbi, what's with this custom? That's a really weird custom. Why do you guys do that? And the rabbi, a little bit embarrassed, said, I don't know. I've never asked. If there's one person in this entire synagogue, this entire shul that would know, it's that guy. He's the oldest member of the congregation. And so the man is ready for this older guy to just drop wisdom on him. And he approaches him and he says, sir, please tell me why, when everyone is dancing on the dance floor, do they dip in that one spot? And the old man looks at him and he says, oh, that? There used to be a chandelier there. And so how often are we reacting to chandeliers? Non-existent chandeliers. Just because it's always been done that way doesn't mean that it always has to be done that way. In biology, I took a couple courses in biology before my biology professor said maybe get out of biology. But in biology, they teach us about vestigial structures. And what a vestigial structure is that as our bodies adapted, like our jaws changed, our skull shape, whatever changed. And so we used to have wisdom teeth and use them. They used to be really important, but as our diets changed and the shape of our skull changed, wisdom teeth became not needed. But not only not needed, how many of you have gotten your wisdom teeth out or had to get your kids' wisdom teeth out? How many of you have lived through that experience? Awful, awful. I remember I let my wisdom teeth like a week later. I feel like, okay, they're probably better now. Take one bite into a pretzel. They weren't better. It was awful. So what do wisdom teeth have to do with all of this? They're a vestigial structure. Our bodies haven't gotten rid of them yet, but they're there for reasons that we don't need them anymore. And so now they're just causing trouble. How many policies, and these might be policies that come from your school, but many of them are policies that you hold yourself to. Many of them are just customs that you and your fellow teachers and your school have created. And when things change, like now for sure, we're so married to those old customs that we keep dipping where the chandelier used to be. And I know you're probably thinking, well, why are you talking to me about demands and about these policies and what? We're going to get there. You have more power than you think. You know, I definitely talk to administrators and leaders about these things, but when I do, I always add the caveat that none of this stuff can really start or end with them. It needs to start and end from the front lines, from the teachers in the classrooms. Support. Emotional and instrumental support. These are two things that we need as human beings. You know this, your teachers in your classrooms. Students need two types of support. Sometimes they come to you because they need help with their assignment, and sometimes they come to you because they just need to talk. They need a mentor. They need you to help them. And sometimes it's not clear. Sometimes they'll come to you about a conflict or about homework being too hard or whatever, and you're not sure whether they just want you to listen and be empathetic or whether they want you to offer a solution. We need both of these things, and we need both of these things in our workplace. And these are things that you can provide your coworkers, and your coworkers can provide you, and your administration can provide you, and yes, you can even provide to your administrators. Support is essential, and it is very much in your control. So if we go back to the poll everywhere, if you have that open on another browser, this right here, in one word, it's a little bit tricky, but in one word, what can your coworkers do to support you? And if you're not on poll everywhere, put it in the chat box, but poll everywhere will make it look pretty. So if you've got poll everywhere, put it in there. And what are we seeing? Patience, empathy. Yes, keep putting them in. These are things that you have an opportunity right now. You are in here with your coworkers. You are in here with fellow teachers. And some of us, you know, we are perpetually children. We just get older and some of us get balder, but we're children. And so just as children need help, we need help, but we become a little bit too self-conscious to ask. We see it as weakness. If we're a tenured teacher, we think we need to have it all figured out. So we're not going to go and ask for help. Emotional help? No way. Even help with a lesson or whatever? No way. But it is so important. So ask it now where it's anonymous. Tell people how they can help you. So we see patience. Bring chocolate. I absolutely love that one. Listen. Ideas. Empathy. These are all amazing. In the chat window, we've got validation, understanding, listen. Those are huge. Validation is absolutely huge here. In the other talk, somebody put up no kvetching. And I thought that really hit me because it's true that nobody wants to hear a negative Nancy go on and just complain with no end in sight. Nobody wants to hear that. But there is a very, I don't know that it's a stark difference. I think that it's a gray line between kvetching and reaching out for emotional support. Sometimes we need to reach out and we don't want an answer. We don't want a solution. We just want you to know how we feel. We need to talk to somebody who understands, who we can run our ideas by. And so that's something that we need, and that is not kvetching. It is so important to allow people to talk to you and to tell you how they feel, and for you to not have to say, well, you know, look at the statistics, it's not that bad. Who cares if they think it's bad, if they think that this is the scariest thing they've ever lived through, then let them own that and listen to them and be there for them. Ask them if there's somehow you can help. Otherwise, just be there to listen actively and to maybe suggest some of your ideas, but don't argue with them. Don't try to change their mind. Be there for them and let them know, yeah, this is not a perfect world, but I am here for you. And we are in this together, and we are here for our children. A bunch of new ones came in. We have helpful suggestions. That's huge. And that really comes to that piece where you need to know the difference between when somebody is asking for suggestions and when somebody just wants to talk. And here's an age-old secret. It might have been the Dalai Lama who said this. He said, just ask them. Ask them. It might not have been the Dalai Lama. Ask them, do you want me to make some suggestions, or do you want me to just listen? That's not an inappropriate question. The last piece after support is control. This sense of control that we just said is gone. No sense of control anymore. And perhaps this is, we give a lot of reasons why it's important to come back to school and why not to continue Zoom, etc. I will tell you that from a psychological perspective, going back to school is maybe one of the most valuable things for you if you do it with the right mindset. Because at school, in your classroom, you have a sense of control. And beyond just a sense of control, you have a sense of mission. You get to take back control and regain mission and purpose in your life. Interestingly, when we start to feel like we lose control, it's very similar to this concept of learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is where we start to think that our actions are no longer controlling our own destiny. So you guys were all doing something. You were on some sort of path, whatever that was. And you felt like the things you did were making a difference and impacting your future. And when we start to lose that sense of control, we start to feel helpless. And that is a precursor to depression. This is serious stuff. And that's why it is so important when you start going down that path to take something and regain control, regain that sense of control. I was speaking to someone the other day, and she was telling me how she lost 150 pounds or something like that. Amazing. And I said, I have one question for you. And she said, how did I do it? I said, no, that's not what I was going to ask. That's what everybody asks her. I asked her, what did that process do for every other aspect of your life? How did that impact every other aspect of your life? And when and some of you have gone on this journey or a similar journey, when you decide to take control of one piece of your life, everything just starts to feel like it's falling in place. Because control is control. You learn that you are in control of your destiny, even when it seems like the cards are stacked against you. So let's go here. I would love for you guys to get into the poll everywhere or the chat. And in one word, answer this question. One thing, what is the one thing or one thing that you can control at school? I know often it feels like everything's the administrators and the parents and the kids and what do I get to? You get to control things at school. Name one thing that is in your control this school year. My classroom, my bulletin board, my smile, awesome suggestions, how I treat my students, my lesson plans, my reactions, and your actions. You don't have to wait for an action to react to. You can actually control your environment even more by taking the preemptive step with your actions. Students love, feel, and that, students feel love, I'm thinking somebody said, but that's exactly right. And that's something that doesn't have to change in your classroom. So much has to change. You need to social distance. You need to wear masks or figure out how that's all happening. You need plexiglass things up everywhere in some schools. But one thing doesn't have to change, and that's that sense of love that your students feel. You can be silly. You get to create your own environment again. Your school is the microcosm of the world. It might exist within the larger context of your school, and it might exist within the larger context of America and the world and coronavirus and everything else that 2020 brings. It might survive in that context, but it is a unique world that is under your control. And when we talk about control, I think a lot of times we talk about control and we limit it to our classroom, because I didn't say the classroom. You guys started naming a lot of things about the classroom, but is that really where our control begins and ends? What if I told you that your sense of control, what you can control, is so much greater? What if I told you that you have more control than you've even imagined? One of my favorite experiments. They took a bunch of people and they brought them to this giant auditorium. The auditorium was like this nondescript, like a typical gym auditorium sort of thing. But the only thing unusual about this auditorium was that they put letters on the walls. A, B, C, D, etc. Big papers with the letter written on it. And they take this big group of people, pre-COVID, put them all in one room like that. But they take this big group of people and they said to them, 3 rules for this experiment. Easiest money they'll ever make. 3 rules. You're all going to enter the room, and there are 3 rules. 1, you must always walk within an arm's length of at least one other person. 2, you may not touch anyone, you may not speak to anyone, you may not motion to anyone, you may not communicate in any way. And 3, we want you to walk randomly throughout the room. Now, anybody who knows about psychological experiments, you often will grab, we call them confederates, these inside people who are really in on it or partially in on it. So they grabbed a couple of the people and they said to them, okay, same rules apply to you. The first 2, you need to enter the room, stay within an arm's reach of at least one other person at all times. You need to make sure you do not communicate in any way with anyone or touch anyone. But number 3, we want you to make your way to marker C on the wall. And they let them go and they split them up. They're sort of walking amongst the crowd just like everyone else. And you see this horde of people sort of going this way and making their way randomly around the room until they gradually make their way to marker C. Everybody in the experiment ends up at marker C. That's herding behavior. That's not so weird. Here's what's so weird. When they asked the subjects of the experiment, they asked them how you made it to marker C, everyone thought it happened randomly. When they told them that they were led there, no one believed them. Because we think that leadership has to come from somebody with a big staff that says, all right, follow me. We think that it needs to be the person with the title, with the fancy office. But the truth about leadership and about change management in general is that it never works that way as well as it works when it comes from within. So it is important for your administrators to do all the research and put together the policies and hand those over to you and hopefully motivate you and help you along the way. But do not be confused. They are nothing without you. They don't get to dictate the environment, the culture of the school. You do. We talk so much about how contagious Corona is. I've never seen anything, including Corona, that is more contagious than a bad mood. People are walking mood inductors. It turns out we have these things called mirror neurons. And so it's only us, humans, primates, birds. That's it. We have these things called mirror neurons. And these things are reactionary. So there was an experiment, and one of the interns, they're doing these experiments on monkeys. They've got them wrapped up. You know, they've got the little funny helmets on, like looking at their brain waves. And one of the interns pulls out an ice cream. It's a hot day, and he starts licking the ice cream. And one of the monkeys is like staring at him. And suddenly, you started seeing the neurons go off as if the monkey was eating the ice cream. Not as if the monkey was watching somebody eat the ice cream. The monkey was experiencing the ice cream. This happens in people. That's why smiles are contagious. And by the way, I've heard, nobody can see me smile in a mask. Absolutely we can. We can see the crinkles in your eyes. We can see everything that your body is saying to us. We know when you're happy or sad. And we will react to it without even knowing. So when we walk into that room and make our way to Marker C, what is Marker C? Marker C is a positive experience at school. Marker C is a Corona year, a 2020 year of school that we will never forget, not just because of all of the impact and the negative impact that it's had, but I want, and I hope that you want, and I think that you want, a year where future teachers will come to you and say, what was it like teaching in 2020? Where your children or grandchildren will say to you, what was it like teaching in 2020? And you say, that was the year that I signed up for as a teacher. Because that was the year that my students needed me most. And that was the year that I was there for them. That was the year that I chose to be a positive impact and to change the entire feeling, whatever is happening with all of it's just gross out there in the world. There's so much hatred, there's so much darkness, there's so much of that in your classroom. Bring the light. And it doesn't have to stop right there. It can go far, far beyond that. But here's the problem. What if you're thinking, this is great, but I just checked the red frowny face. And so if you're counting on me, I'm not there. What, you want me to go in and just pretend, woo, I'm so excited? No. But before we get to that, I had a little problem for you to figure out. I know there are hopefully some math teachers in here. So here's the problem. Are you ready? You might want to grab a paper pen. You might want to grab a calculator. I promise it won't be like trigonometry or whatever. I wouldn't be able to figure that out. And give me a thumbs up if you're ready for this. A bunch of teachers who didn't come prepared for class. That's so here it is. Ready? You've got the paper, everything cool. You're driving a bus. The bus comes to the first stop of the day. 5 people get on the bus. That's 5 people get on the bus. The bus then makes a right, and then it makes a left. 2 people get off the bus, and 3 people get on the bus. The bus then makes 3 rights, where 1 person gets off the bus and 7 people get on the bus. You with me? The bus has 2 additional stops. Each of those stops, 3 people get on, straight line. The bus then turns right and stops at its final stop. And here's the question. Are you ready? You got your notes? What color are the bus driver's eyes? And now you can respond right in the poll everywhere window, or you can respond in the chat. We've got green, we've got brown. So a little bit of disagreement there. Is this a trick question? Is this a trick question? Brown. All right, who thinks it's a trick question? It is a trick question. It wouldn't be fun if it wasn't a trick question. You were primed to think of this as a math question. You were primed to think of this as a directional question, right? You were primed to think that it was going to be one of those types of things. I started the question with this sentence. You are driving a bus. What are the bus driver's eyes? If you know it now, put it in there. No driver. That's cool technology. It's almost here. I think it is in some town in Florida. I saw there's like a little bus that's driverless. So why is this relevant? Because you were so focused on one thing that you never saw the other thing coming. You anticipated something, so you never saw the other thing. And this is super relevant because the bus problem is a focus problem. A bunch of years ago, too many, makes me feel old. My wife and I went on a trip to Arizona. Now, when I say we went on a trip, I was going to do a training for a week in Arizona. My wife and I were sort of newly married. We had a brand new baby at home, in that order, by the way. And so my wife and I had to go out of town for training. We were still, by the way, in the early stages of childcare where we were still like putting diapers on his head and trying to figure out all this stuff. And so, I was very sensitive. And I said to my wife, I said, honey, I'll see you in a week. And she said, we're coming with you. I said, you're coming with me to Arizona? What are you going to do all day? I'm going to be in a training all day, every day. What are you going to do? At this point, she was not Miss Independent. Like, we were one of those nauseating couples that just went everywhere with each other. Now we're an old married couple. We never go anywhere with each other. But back then we were like this. We were clinging on to each other all the time. My wife didn't want to go on day trips without me. Well, turns out she did, because the alternative is staying, how many miles behind all the way in Baltimore. So my wife and son decided to come with me. And so we get to Arizona, we rent a car. And this was a really weird car. So the car almost looked like a hearse, but in a cool way, if that's possible. So we rent the car, and every day my wife would take the car, drop me off at the training, and go and explore Arizona. She was finding all this really cool stuff. And at the end of the day, she and my son would drive back to the training center and pick me up, and we'd go back to the hotel, and she'd tell me all about her adventures. It was weird that she was doing this, but she was loving it. And as she fell in love with this experience of just going and like exploring and the freedom of it, she was also falling in love with this strange car. Because this strange car was not just a car. This strange car was linked to her newfound independence. And so we get back to the airport and we return the car. My wife literally gives the car some sort of weird hug and says, when we get back to Baltimore, our van is almost dead. We should get one of these when it dies. And I said, honey, we can't get one of these. She said, why not? I said, because this is a West Coast car. She said, what's a West Coast car? I said, a West Coast car. Have you ever seen one of these on the East Coast? And she said, well, no. I said, yeah, they only make them on the West Coast. It's a West Coast car. Full disclosure, if you haven't figured out that I know nothing about cars, then you know less than me. So I thought this was legitimately a West Coast car. So we get in the airplane, we fly back to Baltimore, we get to our van in long-term parking, and we're walking toward our van, and my wife starts to freak out. She starts hitting me. Hey, look. The West Coast car was parked just a couple spaces away from our van. We had never seen this car before in our lives. We get in our car, we jump on the highway, start driving home, and I remember this very clearly because I almost drove off the road as my wife Rachel starts freaking out again. Oh my God, look, the West Coast car. And then we passed another one and another one. And I was completely in the twilight zone when we pull up into our neighborhood. And right there, like one street down in the driveway, the West Coast car. So what was going on? I feel like there's two options. One, perhaps this car just started selling like hotcakes that week we were in Arizona. Or there was something else happening. And it turns out that the Dodge Magnum, the 2007 Dodge Magnum, never sold like hotcakes. I think it might have been the last year they made a Dodge Magnum. So what was happening? Well, to understand what was happening, we have to go to another trip that my wife and I did together when we were still single and childless and crazy. We decided we were going to jump out of a plane. How many of you have jumped out of a plane? This is weird. I talked to Jewish day school teachers and no hands go up. I talked to restaurant owners in Texas, every hand goes up. So I like this crowd because I have a story to tell. So when you get to, when you go skydiving, you get there, they take your money, non-refundable. They make sure to take that first so you can't back out. And then they pull you into a room and they tell you all about skydiving and about the sense that, by the way, if your chute doesn't open or something happens and your body damages some property on its way down, your estate's going to be in charge of paying for that. Okay. And then throughout this little training thing, they then tell you about this thing called sensory overload. Sensory overload is this idea that, sensory overload is this idea that the first time, and for most people, maybe the only time, you decide to step out of a moving airplane in the air, you will be hit with so many brand new sensations that you have never experienced before in your life. Your brain will go into overdrive trying to make sense of them all. And in that process, will literally overload itself and you will black out. It doesn't happen to everyone. I hate to admit it, but my wife is a little bit cooler than me. It did not happen to her. It happened to me. When you go back and watch the video, I told him, yeah, I want to pull the ripcord. And by him, I mean the giant German man strapped to my back. we jumped tandem. So I told him, yeah, I want to pull the ripcord. We topple out of the plane and we are falling. And he indicates, he shows me his altimeter, which is the indication that I'm supposed to pull the ripcord. But in the meantime, you see my face. I was dead. I was out of it. I was blacked out. The guy starts slapping my cheeks. He starts pulling my hair. I had some back then, didn't have kids yet. And he starts doing everything to wake me up, to get me out of this. And I am gone. I am blank because of sensory overload. You know, chivalry isn't dead. So when we stepped out of that plane, I allowed my wife to go first because I'm that kind of guy. But I went second and ended up landing so far before her that my chute opened, takes me down. I am able to take my chute and the German guy off of my back and turn my attention and see my wife landing. She was supposed to land before us, but it turns out our free fall was so long, almost dangerously long, because I had insisted I wanted to pull the ripcord, and this guy was a nice guy. He wasn't going to let me down. We were free falling forever. So what is sensory overload? Why does it exist? When we wake up in the morning and we leave our front door, if sensory overload was in play, we would face plant on the sidewalk immediately because there's different sounds. There's children and birds and cars and all these things going on out there and smells and whatever, right? And so we'd be overloaded. Our brain would be overloaded and we face plant on the sidewalk. So in order to prevent this, our brain has a system. It's actually the most primitive and first spam filter ever invented, and it's in your brain. So what does a spam filter do? It turns out that 95% of our thinking happens non-consciously. 95%. Because our brain is a super powerful tool. But if it allowed all the stimuli in, we would have a lot of trouble. We would constantly be in sensory overload. So what has our brain evolved into? Our brain figures out how to protect us from the overload. And the way that it does that is when the stimuli come in, it decides relevant, irrelevant. And so for my wife and I, we're clearly not car people. So a Dodge Magnum was never significant to us. So yeah, maybe our eyes saw it, but we were never even alerted to it. It was placed directly into our spam folder before we were ever conscious of what we were seeing. And so when we saw the Dodge Magnum in Arizona, it was literally the first time we consciously acknowledged a Dodge Magnum. Now, I think there's like 5 in all of Maryland, but if one of those cross our path, we see it because it's significant. And that's the key to all of this. You are problem solvers. You teach your kids to be problem solvers. If my kid is in your class, you better be a problem solver. And in order to be a good problem solver, what do you need? You need to be a problem finder. I want you to check and I want you to figure out that my kid has dyslexia like as early as possible so that then we can be problem solvers and fix it. So we train to see problems. That's a problem in itself because of our spam filter, because our brain protects us from sensory overload. And so it decides what's relevant and what's not. And you train yourself and you're so focused on finding these problems and issues and dealing with things that your brain quickly learns that the problems are significant, that they need to go in your main mail folder. But the positive stuff, that's just a distraction. So plop takes it right out. And you never even truly see it or sense it. That bad news is also really good news because my wife and I cannot unsee the Dodge Magnum because it became significant to us. You can recalibrate that spam filter. You can begin to tell your brain what is important to you, what you want to be conscious of, what you want to see. And in a world filled with uncertainty and darkness, it's almost become uncouth to see the positive. But it is so important to see the positive right now. And I give you permission to allow yourself to see the positive in the world right now, to see the positive about going back to school, to see the positive of your teaching in Corona, and still hold on to all of the other stuff, the negative feelings. You can still hold on to that. You don't have to let that go. You can still feel good about the impact you can have on your kids while simultaneously thinking, well, maybe it would be better if we weren't back in school. It's okay to have both of those things going on. But for most of us, both of those things aren't going on. We are so polarized right now, more than we've ever been on a societal level. But we've always been polarized on a personal level. We have people that can't not see the positive. We have people that can't not see the negative. And now we have groups of people, depending on what news station you watch, your personal experiences, whether you vote Democrat, Republican, or whether you have been personally affected by somebody who died during COVID, or whether you don't know a single person who's gotten COVID. That's all going to come into play in terms of forming your perspective. But for most of you, or at least many of you, your perspective is somewhere within the green range or the red range. And for most of your coworkers, most of your administrators, most of your students, most of their families, that's true as well. And they're not necessarily on the same side. It is so important to understand the full spectrum and allow yourself to experience and see the whole spectrum. That's what empathy is. That's what having an open mind is. So how do you retrain yourself? Martin Seligman is the founder of positive psychology. This is a branch of psychology where they decided, psychology has always been about fixing sick people, but that's not what it was supposed to be about originally. It was supposed to be about getting us to the next level, right? Taking people who are good and bringing them all the way up. And so we formed positive psychology, which is dedicated to ways to find ways to improve ourselves beyond the status quo. And he has introduced and adopted so many different ways to retrain your brain. Retrain, recalibrate that spam filter. And one of those ways is one that my family and I adopted. Our favorite three. That's what we call it. Every night before bed, we do our favorite three. You see, in my family, we have about split almost 50-50 down the middle. We have optimists, and we have what my wife insists I call realists. And so the realists tend to struggle when things get tough. And so we adopted our favorite three, where every night we get together. If I'm across the country, I'll dial in for it, but we get together and we go over our favorite three, which is as simple as it sounds. What were your three favorite moments from the day? Now, I am not one of those guys that says you got to stand in front of the mirror and you got to say, I'm fabulous because if that works for you, great. I'm not the one to say, yeah, go do yoga. If that works for you, great. But what I can tell you is this might sound foo-foo, it works. The favorite three recalibrates your brain. It works psychologically and biologically. It works. And so you get together with your family, with a friend, you do it over Zoom, or you do it in the mirror. But you force yourself to find your three favorite moments from that day. And here's why it works. Because in the beginning, you might struggle. And it might be difficult to find three. But the next day and the next day and the next day, you're going to be looking for those things because you're going to be held accountable. You're going to have to find three things throughout the day. So now all day you are searching for those positive experiences. And so you start to see them where they happen. Maybe you were feeling stressed. Maybe you were crying on your desk. And that is right here. You are totally on that. And it's all you can think about the rest of the day, how depressed you are. You're crying on your desk. And you completely forget what it felt like when your co-teacher brought you a soda or a glass of water and put it on the desk next to you. and said, is there anything I can do? Maybe you missed that part. But if you're looking for it, you're not going to miss it. And over time, it is going to become even more relevant to you. It's going to become your West Coast car. It's going to become your Dodge Magnum, the thing you can't unsee. And you're not going to stop seeing the problems. We have this inability, like we don't want to let go. We need to hold on to our stance. We need to hold on to the issues we have. What happens if you just put them to the side for a second and embrace the positive experiences as well? That's how you retrain your brain. So I want to ask you, I want to get you guys in on this favorite three, but I want one from you. If you want to do three, do them as three separate things, perfect. But I want you to name one highlight from this week so far. And for some of you, I know this week has not been full of highlights. Do it. Make yourself do it. If you are thinking you don't want to do this right now, you're the person who needs to do it. You are the person who needs to do it. One sentence. And if it's something related to being back at school, you get bonus points. And I recently read an article. There was an article in one of the major papers on this fallacy of positivity, that we can be too positive sometimes. And I always tell people, no. The way to be positive is not to tell everybody, everything's great. Yay, we're great. No. Positivity is to be realistic, to be real, to understand what's going on and to fully understand what's going on and see the positive as well. So we have some coming in. Somebody went to the beach with their kids. That's amazing. Decorated a bulletin board and it looks amazing. That is something that you have control over, right? Decided being back was going to be okay. That's huge. That is huge. And it's just a mental shift. I love that one. Attending this workshop. Oh, thank you. Mrs. Horowitz gets brownie points. I got a positive R. This is great. Okay. This is great, guys. So please keep putting them in, because we are surrounded by positive things as well as the challenges. And we all know the challenges, seeing real live people. This is great. So when we're going out there, we need to be sensitive to each other. We need to strive to be positive, but wherever you are on that continuum, if there's one thing I need you to take away from this, it's that we need to be sensitive to the fact that people are all over that continuum and that is okay. And wherever they are, that is okay. Empathy is paramount right now. The other day, my wife was talking to a fellow teacher, and the fellow teacher made a legitimate argument, just saying, against my wife's anxiety in the moment, saying this person said, sometimes it just feels like we're doing, we're helping the few and ignoring the many, or whatever. That basically we're not bringing kids back and taking off our masks and things like that just because of the few. That's a perspective, and it's a valid perspective. What this woman did not know when she said that to my wife is that my wife this week had lost her uncle and aunt to COVID. They died days apart from each other. Her anxiety was 100% okay. Her co-teachers' positive outlook on this and thinking like, this is over, that is 100% okay. But we need to be sensitive to each other and understand that, there's this meme going around everywhere that we're all in the same storm, but we're in very different boats. Many of us have been closed off in Corona with nobody, and we're feeling lonely. Me, I have 5 kids and a 120-pound dog. I'm not feeling lonely. I've got other challenges being locked in with those guys. We have to understand that everybody is coming at this differently, from a different place. Often, we can lose sight of why we started this whole thing. As we mentioned in the beginning, Khani introduced me and told you that my background, my dissertation research is in the connection of meaningful work and burnout. What's extremely interesting and drove me to this work is, why is it that the teachers the nurses, the doctors, the social workers, the helpers, the heroes are the ones who burn out so quickly and so badly. Their jobs are so meaningful. Why are they burning out? And it is precisely that. You got into this for a reason. And I want you to put the reason in one word on this board, on the poll everywhere. I want you to tell me why you became a teacher in the first place. Nobody made you do it. And if you put money on there, I'm not going to believe you. Give me a real reason. One word. People, love, nurture. All of this. These are huge. This is why you got into it. This is why you do what you do. And the reason why meaningful work leads to burnout is because we start forgetting this. We start forgetting this stuff because other things get in the way, the bureaucracy, the corona, all this stuff that's now I got to do this with two hands tied behind my back. And we become demoralized. And the first thing we lose is our sense of purpose, our mission, why we did this. It is so important now more than ever to get back to that, to understand that, to reconnect with that. I'm leaving this slide up for a second so you can read this, and I'll go back to it at the end so you can see what people are saying. And please keep adding, even if you've just put one, add some more reasons why you became a teacher. The great environment, to give over what I know and love, to affect change. If your kids didn't need it, if they needed it before, they need it now. They need it now. There's a story that I love. I actually saw this on like a signpost at I forget where I saw it, but I saw it on a signpost. It was this little story, and I loved it, and I use it everywhere now. But I think it is so appropriate for you now because many of you, hopefully you're starting to reconnect with why you do this. But for some of you, you're still stuck with the question, why can't I do this from home though? What was wrong with that? And I can only give you this suggestion. There was a rabbi who's, most of my stories start with rabbis, really confused them in Texas. But there was a rabbi who lost his wife. And his oldest son, shortly after, started disappearing for hours on end. So one day, the rabbi followed his son. And he saw that his son would enter the woods and just go wander through the woods. And he had this little spot where he would stop and be muttering to himself. And the rabbi asks his son, he says, where are you going every day? Why are you coming here? What are you doing in this spot? And his son said, I come here to talk to God. To which the rabbi responds, son, God is the same everywhere. And his son responded, I know that, Dad, but I'm not. Learning happens everywhere. Teaching happens everywhere. Your love for your children comes through everywhere. But there's something so special about being able to open that environment for your children, that little microcosm, that little world that you create for them where you control the love. You control the amount of fear and intimidation and anxiety. You can leave those things out and embrace the love and the growth and all of the other things that you bring to your classroom. The nurturing, the creativity. I want to leave you with one final story. My in-laws live all the way out in Carroll County. So in the Frum community, I just say, like near Piney Run. All Frum people know Piney Run for some reason, but they live all the way out in Carroll County. For other people, I say, yeah, you go to Randallstown and then you just keep driving, you see the cows and then you just keep driving. So they live all the way out. And one thing you need to know about my in-laws and my wife, that whole side of the family, they do what I call the Rickless goodbye. Their goodbyes last from 5 o'clock in the evening to like 11 o'clock. My wife's finally getting on the road. I love it. Don't get me wrong. I love it. But one day, my wife is out there with my oldest two kids, who at the time, my son was 5 years old, sitting in the middle seat. And my daughter was just a baby. She was 3 years old, sitting in her car seat, sleeping in the back seat. My son's looking out the window. They're driving home. They meant to leave at 5 o'clock. It's now super late. And so the car is completely silent as my wife makes her way home. They pass a big field. My son's looking out the window. And they pass a herd of deer when my son says, "Mom, what's the purpose of deer?" My wife gave him the teacher answer, the mom answer, right? You know how you answer these questions. "I don't know, son. What do you think the purpose of deer is?" Right? So pass it right back to you. And so they go back and forth and they talk about what is the ultimate purpose of deer? Is it to add grace to the world and beauty? My son thought maybe to feed the foxes. So whatever it is, they're discussing the different purposes for deer. And then their conversation trails off and the car goes silent again. At that moment, my 3-year-old Rena from the back seat, where everyone thought she was sleeping, peeps up and says, "Mommy, what's my purpose?" My wife took a deep breath and her mind began to spin. What is her purpose? Is she going to create the next Facebook? Is she going to come up with the cure for cancer? Is she going to be the first female president of the United States? What is her purpose? And before she could utter a response, my 5-year-old son says, "That's easy, Rena. Your joy, that's your purpose. You make people happy." My son understood what we all understood at one point. But as we get older, we start to think that our purpose needs to put us on the cover of Time magazine, that a life worth living needs to put us on the cover of Time magazine. Otherwise, good luck next time. What my son understood was he knew the person that my daughter is. He knew Rena. And he knew who she was, and he knew that just by being her authentic self, she was impacting the world in an unmeasurable way. What is your purpose? As teachers, why did you become a teacher? This is your purpose, and you need to be your authentic self. You don't need to do crazy things. You need to just walk into the room and lead people to see. You need to just start opening your eyes to the blessings in your life. And you need to be your authentic self, the person who brought you to this profession. And do it more now than ever. And do it with a little bit more sensitivity and grace. And do it with an open mind, understanding that nothing will be perfect because we aren't in a perfect situation, but that you are going to do the best that you can. And that you have ultimate control over that. And not just that, but by being you, whether your thing is love or nurturing or growing or inspiring, whatever your thing is, you're going to bring that to your students. But it doesn't have to stop at the walls of your classroom. You can bring it to your coworkers. You can bring it to your administrators. I'm counting on you to bring it to your kids' parents and the community at large. You got in this for a reason. This is not easy. And anybody who tells you it is being way too positive about all this. It's precisely that it's not easy that makes us have so much gratitude toward you. And be so appreciative of you. I really appreciate this. It is truly, and I'm not just saying this, it is truly an honor. You are the lifeblood of our community. You are the secret to Jewish existence and continuity. You are heroes, and that is it. That is the bottom line. You are heroes. And to be able to come and hopefully have a little bit of an impact on how you view this new situation and how you approach this new situation is beyond an honor, and I take it with total seriousness. There's a form here that all of you should have received in your emails, and this is just something where you can mark these things down and take some notes on your experience today, because the second you step away from your desk, you're going to move on to the next thing. I want you to remember how you feel right now. I want you to get reconnected with your why. I want you to know why you became a teacher. I want you to know how you can change your perspective and how impactful you are, you can be, you need to be. So if you fill this out, there's also the top part has my contact information. That is my personal cell phone. You can text me, you can call me, you can email me, you can reach out to me in any way. And if I don't get it right then, I will get back to you, because this is truly an honor and a responsibility in my eyes. This is my purpose, is to help people with much more meaningful lives and much more meaningful work than mine. My purpose is to help you do your job and to be there for you. So if you need anything, please reach out. And if there are any questions, we can definitely take those now.
I want to just say thank you. I don't think there's much I can say to follow that up. And I don't want to kill the impact, but I just want to say thank you, Dov, so much. And I want to thank each of you for participating. I want to thank the Center for Jewish Education for making this learning opportunity possible. I've certainly learned so much, and my hope is that you have as well.
Yeah, thank you to Khani. It's a long story, but Khani originally reached out to me. She said, "I heard you're a comedian." I said, "Don't let my wife hear that." So I'm like, not exactly, but this is what I do. And
this was definitely for share, right? I found you for all the wrong things, and it worked out great.
But for Khani and the CJE to get behind this, because I know that in your professional development, you've covered everything about how to keep yourself and your kids safe in COVID, all about the new policies. You've talked about the social emotional needs of your students. But so often when we're talking to heroes about their work, we forget that they are people too, and that they need this. And you guys walk into school with such brave faces as leaders, each of you, that sometimes things like this get left in the cracks. And it's not out of animosity or anything like that. And it's not out of a lack of caring. But we're all trying to figure this out. So for the CJE and Khani to be so ahead of the curve with this and understand its importance is amazing. And I can't say enough about them.
Thanks again. I want to wish everybody a wonderful Shabbos. It should be a peaceful and restful one that energizes you for your work ahead. If you have a colleague that you think really could have heard this message and will benefit from hearing it, we have recorded this class, as was indicated when you entered the Zoom room, and we will gladly spread the inspiration to anyone who needs it. So please let me know if that can be helpful. Thanks so much.